At exactly 11:14 a.m. on January 11, 1944, Major James Howard circled high above Oschersleben, Germany, in his P-51B Mustang. From 4 miles up, he watched as nearly 30 German fighters swooped down toward 60 unescorted B-17 bombers. Howard was 33, a seasoned veteran who had flown 86 missions in China with the Flying Tigers. Yet this day was only his 37th mission in the new Mustang, an aircraft so fresh and untested that many in command had already labeled it a death trap for long-range escort. The past few months had been disastrous for the 8th Air Force. In only 3 raids without escort, 180 bombers had been lost beyond the German frontier. The new P-51B, powered by a Merlin engine, had joined combat a mere 5 weeks earlier, and Howard's 354th Fighter Group had been the first to carry it deep into enemy skies. They proudly called themselves the Pioneer Mustang Group. Between August and October 1943, unprotected bomber formations had suffered catastrophic losses, often 60 aircraft in a single mission, over targets like Schweinfurt and Regensburg. On Black Thursday, October 14th, 60 B-17s were destroyed in one day, claiming the lives of over 600 airmen. The losses were so heavy that High Command almost abandoned daylight bombing entirely. Then came December 5th. For the first time, 36 P-51Bs from Howard's group escorted bombers all the way to Paris. Still, the top brass doubted the aircraft. The Mustang's range was theoretical, engine reliability untested, and its endurance in battle unknown. Now, over Oschersleben, Howard's radio crackled faintly. His 4-ship flight had scattered, each man chasing his own enemy contact. He was suddenly alone. Below, swarms of Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf Fw-190s were diving on the 401st Bomb Group, flying at 23,000 feet. The German squadrons had taken off from 3 airfields near Brunswick, shadowing the bomber stream for nearly 20 minutes. Then the sky lit up. The lead German fighters opened fire from 800 yards out. A bomber nicknamed Little Chum was hit in both wings. Another, Hell's Angels, lost an engine, trailing black smoke. The formation tightened desperately, but there was nowhere to run. 60 bombers, 600 men, and no escort. They would have to fight their way through for another 37 minutes before reaching friendly skies. Howard shoved his throttle forward and dove straight into the fight. His Mustang streaked downward at over 400 miles per hour, 6.5 caliber machine guns ready. His first burst caught an Fw-190 square in the tail. The German aircraft disintegrated, trailing smoke. Pulling hard against 7 Gs, Howard climbed and rolled, lining up a Bf-109. His next burst shattered the canopy. Glass and metal exploded outward. A quick rudder kick sent him inverted, dropping onto another Fw-190. 3 kills in less than a minute. But 27 enemy fighters still swarmed below. His radio remained silent. No wingmen, no squadron calls, no orders. Just static. Major James Howard, former Flying Tiger and commander of the 356th Fighter Squadron, was the only Allied fighter standing between 60 bombers and 30 Luftwaffe attackers more than 300 miles inside German airspace. Could one P-51 stand alone against 30 enemy fighters? The German formation split. 15 broke off toward the bombers, while the remaining 15 turned to hunt the lone Mustang. The Luftwaffe pilots expected him to retreat. Fighter doctrine was clear: never engage when outnumbered more than 2-to-1. Howard faced 15-to-1 odds ahead and 15 more behind. He had only 412 rounds per gun, about 2,472 rounds total, and was still 37 minutes from Allied lines. At that altitude, the temperature was minus 42 degrees Fahrenheit. His guns could freeze at any moment. But he didn't back off. He went straight for them. Howard's first pass scattered the German formation, forcing them to break off their attack on the bombers. Climbing back to 24,000 feet, he positioned himself squarely between the enemy and his bombers. The Germans were caught off guard. Standard American escort tactics said to stay close to the bombers, act defensively, guard the formation. But Howard wasn't guarding anymore. He was hunting. Alone. At 11:17 a.m., 3 Bf-109s came head-on, closing speed over 700 miles per hour. Both sides fired at 600 yards. Howard's tracers climbed perfectly up the nose of the lead fighter, punching through its frame. Each burst from Howard's guns carried over 11,000 foot-pounds of force. The German fighters fired wildly, their tracers slicing the air wide of their target. At just 200 yards, one Bf-109 broke hard left, white coolant vapor streaming from its wounded Daimler-Benz engine against the frozen blue sky. The other two peeled away. Howard snapped his Mustang around, pulling a brutal 8G turn. For a second, his vision dimmed, the blood drained from his head, darkness closing in. Then color rushed back as he rolled out on the tail of another FW-190. A 3-second burst, about 90 rounds fired, and the German's right wing folded inward at the root. Another kill. 4 down. Inside the bomber formation, Staff Sergeant William Thompson, a ball turret gunner peering from the glass sphere beneath his B-17, watched in disbelief as a single P-51 Mustang tore through the German swarm. Thompson had flown 19 missions in that cramped turret. He'd seen Thunderbolts escort them to the German border only to turn back. He'd seen P-38 Lightnings struggle at altitude, but he'd never seen anything like this. In just 4 minutes, he counted the Mustang making 6 separate attacks, diving, climbing, rolling, never stopping, always putting itself between the bombers and the attackers. From the cockpit of Thompson's plane, Lieutenant Robert Johnson, the pilot, keyed the radio asking for the lone fighter's call sign. No answer. The Mustang pilot was far too busy fighting. The P-51B carried 280 gallons of internal fuel, plus 2 275-gallon drop tanks. Howard had already emptied his external tanks on the way in. At full combat power, his engine devoured 2.1 gallons per minute, leaving him roughly 90 minutes of internal fuel. But the bombers still had over 30 minutes to go before reaching friendly skies. If Howard stayed, he'd be running on fumes by the time they crossed the border. If he left, he could safely reach RAF Boxstead with fuel to spare. But leaving wasn't an option. High above, the Luftwaffe regrouped. 26 fighters against 1 Mustang. And Howard dove right back in. His tactics defied every manual. Rather than chase stragglers, he went straight for the formation leaders, striking at the head of each attack group. At 11:22 a.m., he dropped out of the sun and opened fire on the lead FW-190 in a 4-ship formation. The leader broke formation instantly, the rest scattered like startled birds. Howard didn't chase. He climbed back, waited for them to reform, then hit them again. He was using the Mustang's speed advantage to perfection. The P-51 could reach 440 miles per hour at altitude, while the FW-190 maxed out near 408 and the Bf-109 around 420. Howard would dive, attack, pull away faster than they could follow, climb again using his extra energy, and repeat. The Germans couldn't touch him. These weren't rookie pilots either. Many bore Knight's Crosses, veterans of France, Britain, and the Eastern Front. They adapted fast. Some tried sandwich maneuvers, 2 fighters charging head-on while 4 more dove from above. Howard saw it coming. He feigned a head-on attack, then broke sharply to the right, just outside gun range. The diving Germans overshot, unable to adjust. Howard reversed, caught one in the climb and blasted it apart. 5 down. His ammo counter now read 240 rounds per gun, half his supply gone. There were still 25 enemy fighters in the sky and nearly half an hour to the border. Then one by one, his guns began to freeze. The 650 caliber Browning M2s were mounted 3 per wing. At 11:26 a.m., Howard's right outer gun jammed solid. The rapid temperature shifts over 300 degrees Fahrenheit inside the gun against -42 outside caused the metal to contract. The bolt seized mid-cycle.
By the book, he should have broken off immediately. With one gun out, he still had 5 functioning, but 24 German fighters were still clawing for the bombers. He stayed.
The German aces were learning fast. They'd watched this lone Mustang for nearly 13 minutes. They knew his style, diving from above, hitting leaders, extending away using speed. So they changed tactics. At 11:28 a.m., 8 FW-190s split into 2 groups of 4. One climbed high to 25,000 feet, staying visible as bait. The other dropped low, beneath the bombers at 18,000 feet, waiting in ambush. Their plan was elegant and deadly. When Howard dove on the high group, the low one would climb up to trap him. It was a classic bracket maneuver. Howard took the bait anyway. He dove at the upper 4-ship formation, slicing through the air at a 60-degree angle, airspeed climbing past 480 miles per hour. The P-51 was near its limit. Compressibility effects kicked in at Mach 0.75, but he didn't ease off. His 4 working wing guns and 2 nose guns unleashed a stream of fire that walked up the lead FW-190's fuselage, tail to cockpit. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds ripped through the German fighter. The plane flipped inverted, the pilot ejecting as a white parachute bloomed against the gray winter sky. At 23,000 feet, Howard yanked back hard on the stick. 7 Gs slammed him into his seat, his blood rushing from his head. His vision narrowed to a pinpoint, gray edges creeping inward. He eased the pressure just enough for his peripheral sight to return. The 4 fighters that had been lurking below were exactly where he expected, climbing toward him at 3,000 feet per minute, engines screaming at full emergency power. Howard rolled inverted and dove straight at them. The German leader, seeing a Mustang plummet upside down at 500 miles per hour toward his formation, panicked and veered left. His wingmen followed, bewildered. Fighter pilots trained for rational behavior. This was anything but. They scattered. Howard leveled his Mustang, aligned on the trailing FW-190, and fired a 3-second burst. The tail section disintegrated. Control surfaces shredded. 6 confirmed kills. Then his left inboard gun went silent. 4 guns remained with 1,600 rounds total. Inside the B-17 formation, Lieutenant Robert Johnson tracked the bomber's fuel and the unfolding chaos below. The 401st Bomb Group had been over target for 18 minutes, dropping 12,000 pounds of 500-pound bombs on the Focke-Wulf factory at Oschersleben. Smoke and flames rose 11,000 feet into the winter sky. They were on their way home, but still 22 minutes from P-47 fighter range near the German border. The lone Mustang showed no sign of slowing. Johnson counted 9 separate engagements as the P-51 dove, climbed, and rolled tirelessly. At one point, Howard's ammo counter dropped to 100 rounds per gun, giving him just 4 or 5 more attacks if he conserved his bursts. Meanwhile, 22 enemy fighters reformed, now flying tighter, coordinated pairs. They had learned from the Mustang's previous tricks and weren't scattering this time. Howard glanced at his fuel gauge, 73 gallons. Enough to get home, barely. The bombers were 19 minutes from safety. The German formation dove, 22 strong, targeting the bombers in 3 waves. The first 8 fighters aimed at the lead squadron, 7 more at the high squadron, and the final 7 positioned to catch any stragglers. Classic Luftwaffe doctrine: divide the escort and crush the bombers. Only 1 P-51 stood in their way. At 11:34, Howard met the first wave head-on. He picked the leftmost FW-190 and fired a 1-second burst, 30 tracer rounds converging on its engine cowling. It exploded, hurtling debris across his canopy as the fighter rolled away in smoke. 7 confirmed. Using his speed, Howard climbed vertically above the second wave, then dove back onto their tails. A 1-second burst at a trailing Bf-110 sheared its tail off. 8 confirmed. His right inboard gun froze. 3 guns remained with 310 rounds total. The third wave, 7 fighters, climbed toward him. Now he was below them, losing altitude and airspeed advantage. They had the sun, superior numbers, and working guns. Standard tactics would have dictated retreat, regain speed, and re-engage. Howard did the opposite. He climbed straight at the German leader, head-on again. At 400 yards, both pilots opened fire. Howard's 3 remaining guns spat 90 rounds in 3 seconds. German tracers zipped toward his nose. At 100 yards, both should have broken off. Neither did. At 50 yards, the Bf-110's propeller exploded, shredding its own engine. It snapped left. The pilot never bailed out. 9 confirmed kills. Howard streaked through the formation, 6 fighters now firing behind him. Tracers zipped over and under his wings. 1 round tore through his left horizontal stabilizer, another nicked his right aileron. The P-51 shuddered. Controls felt mushy. He pushed forward, diving toward the 15,000-foot cloud deck, Germans in hot pursuit. Inside the clouds, Howard throttled back, rolled inverted, counted 10 seconds, rolled upright, and pulled up hard, breaking back above the clouds behind the chasing fighters. They had overshot. He was now on their tails. He picked the last fighter in the string, an Fw-190, and unleashed a 2-second burst, 60 rounds.
The Fw-190's canopy blew off, and the pilot slumped forward. The fighter entered a violent spin, 10 confirmed kills for Howard. His left wing gun seized. Only 2 guns remained, with 160 rounds left. The enemy formation had scattered once more. Howard climbed back to 24,000 feet, glancing at his fuel gauge, 58 gallons remaining. The bombers were still 16 minutes from safety. In the distance, he spotted P-47 Thunderbolts, tiny black dots approaching from the west, the long-awaited relief force. But they were still 12 minutes away. Meanwhile, the Germans regrouped. 19 fighters remained. They had stopped chasing the bombers. All their attention was now on him. 1 pilot, 2 guns, 160 rounds, 58 gallons of fuel, 12 minutes until backup arrived. Howard's oxygen warning flickered. Low pressure. His mask felt loose. He tightened the straps with numb fingers. The Germans flew line abreast, all 19 charging straight at him. No tricks, no fancy maneuvers, just sheer mass and firepower. Howard turned to meet them. The formation stretched 2 miles across the sky. When they opened fire, it would be a wall of billets, half a mile wide. There was no escape. Either he flew through it, or he didn't make it. He checked his ammunition, 160 rounds across 2 guns, 80 rounds per gun at a cyclic rate of 600 rounds per minute. That gave him about 8 seconds of firing per gun, 16 seconds if both fired together. The Germans closed, 1,000 yards, 900, 800. They opened fire at 700 yards, too early. The bullets fell short. Howard waited. 600, 500. At 400 yards, he fired both guns in a 3-second burst, expending 90 rounds. 70 rounds remained. His tracers converged on the center aircraft, a Bf-109. Its wing root erupted. A fuel tank detonated in a blinding orange fireball at 23,000 feet. The formation split around the explosion. Howard dove through the gap. 11 confirmed kills. He rolled, climbed, and scanned the sky. The Germans reformed. 18 left. They were furious. This lone American had destroyed 11 of their comrades, humiliated an entire Jagdgeschwader, and now they were coming for him again. Their formation tightened, no gaps this time. Howard's fuel gauge dropped to 49 gallons. His oxygen warning glowed a steady red. Each breath was a struggle. Hypoxia crept in. His fingers tingled. His vision narrowed. He shook his head, forcing focus. The bombers were 13 minutes from safety. The P-47s were 9 minutes out. He had to hold for 9 more minutes. The Germans attacked again. Howard turned into them and fired his last 70 rounds in one long 4-second burst. Click, click, click. The guns were empty. He saw strikes on an Fw-190, but couldn't confirm the kill. The fighter broke away, smoking, maybe 12, maybe not. 0 rounds left. The Germans knew it. They had counted his attacks, estimated his ammo. They knew he was out of bullets, defenseless. 18 German fighters closed in on one lone P-51. They spread out, surrounding him. It looked like it was over.
Howard didn't stop. No guns, no ammunition, only speed, skill, and raw determination. He dove at the nearest Bf-109. The German pilots saw the Mustang approaching, saw no muzzle flashes, assumed Howard would break off. He was wrong. Howard stayed on the tail, closing to 50 feet. The German broke first, diving away. Howard followed, tracking him down to 18,000 feet, never letting him escape. The Bf-109 leveled, tried to extend, but the Mustang was faster. Howard closed to 20 feet, the propeller inches from the enemy's tail. The German pulled hard left, nearly stalling before diving toward the ground. Howard climbed back up, 37 gallons of fuel, 12 minutes to safety, 8 minutes until the P-47s arrived. 17 enemy fighters remained, reforming to attack again. Guns empty, fuel low, oxygen failing, hands shaking from cold and hypoxia. Howard met them head-on. Temperature, minus 44 degrees. His cockpit heater had failed 20 minutes ago. 1 Mustang, 17 Germans, 8 minutes to hold. At 11:41 a.m., he dove at another Bf-109, still unarmed. The German held his line for 3 seconds, then broke. Howard followed, weaving through 2 full rolling scissors. 40 seconds of precision maneuvering later, the German disengaged. 1 enemy neutralized without firing a shot. Inside B-17 Hell's Angels, co-pilot Lieutenant James Wilson watched in disbelief. The lone Mustang was still fighting, 27 minutes into the engagement. 12 separate dogfights counted, no gunfire. Just the P-51 chasing, intimidating, outmaneuvering. The Germans suspected a trap, imagined other Mustangs hiding in the sun. There were none, just Howard. 1 pilot, 1 Mustang, 0 ammunition. The German formation leader made a call, split the force. 8 fighters stayed high to pursue Howard, 9 dove for the bombers. If Howard wanted to fight, fine, but the bombers would be left vulnerable. Howard saw the split. He had to choose. He turned toward the 9 diving fighters, caught them at 19,000 feet, approached from their 7 o'clock high, aligned on the leader. No bullets fired, just presence. The German leader broke hard, his wingmen following. The formation scattered. Howard targeted another enemy, 30 feet behind a Fw-190. The German glanced back, saw the Mustang, and broke anyway. 2 more fighters tried to escape. Howard stayed on their tails. Both disengaged. The 8 fighters that had stayed high now dove at him. Airspeed bleeding off, 190 knots, 170, 150, approaching stall at 120. Howard skidded left, rudder kicking, nose down to dive, speed building, 200, 250, 300 knots. The Germans overshot. Fuel gauge, 28 gallons, warning light flashing red. 5 minutes at combat power, 7 at cruise. The bombers were 7 minutes from safety, P-47s 4 minutes out. 36 Thunderbolts, black and white invasion stripes closing fast. At 11:44 a.m., the German leader called off the attack. The Americans would have overwhelming numbers. 18 German fighters turned east, retreating toward Brunswick. They had lost 11 aircraft and 11 pilots, all to 1 Mustang. Howard watched them fade. His engine coughed as fuel pressure dropped. He adjusted the mixture, leaned it out, and the engine smoothed. He turned west, following the bombers. The P-47s formed around them, a protective shield. 1 Thunderbolt pilot pulled alongside and gave a thumbs up. Howard nodded, too exhausted to return the gesture. At 11:47 a.m., 33 minutes after the engagement began, it was over. 60 B-17s headed home, every single bomber Major James Howard had defended intact. 600 airmen survived thanks to 1 pilot who refused to leave. Howard crossed the English coast at 12:23 p.m., fuel gauge reading 11 gallons.
He landed at RAF Boxstead at 12:51 p.m. His P-51B rolled to a stop, ground crew rushing to the aircraft. They'd heard the radio chatter, something about a lone Mustang over Germany. Howard sat motionless for 10 seconds before climbing out. His legs nearly gave way after 3 hours and 37 minutes in the cockpit, 90 minutes of continuous combat. He walked the aircraft with his crew chief, Technical Sergeant Henry Radowski, who counted the damage. One round through the left horizontal stabilizer, another through the right aileron, 37 bullet holes total.
Most of the hits were small-caliber German rounds from long range, but 3 were 20mm cannon strikes. One had punched through the wing root, missing the fuel tank by inches. Radowski looked at Howard, asking how many he'd scored. Howard shrugged, exhausted. Maybe 3, maybe 4. Hard to tell in the fight. The 401st Bomb Group landed at their base in Demethorpe at 1:37 p.m. Every aircraft returned. Lieutenant Robert Johnson climbed out of his B-17. Ball turret gunner Staff Sergeant William Thompson found the intelligence officer breathless. He recounted the fight. Over 30 minutes of combat, one fighter defending 60 bombers. The officer doubted it. He checked with other crews. The story was the same. 18 different bomber crews all reported the same thing. One P-51, call sign unknown, pilot unknown, fighting alone for more than half an hour. The 8th Air Force launched an investigation, combing through mission logs. Only one P-51 from the 354th Fighter Group had remained with the bombers that long, aircraft number 436-315, piloted by Major James H. Howard. Flight records confirmed he landed with 11 gallons of fuel. Gun camera footage verified 11 confirmed kills. Multiple witnesses from bomber crews corroborated the defensive actions that saved the formation. On January 13th, just 2 days after the mission, Lieutenant General Ira Aker, commander of the 8th Air Force, visited RAF Boxstead. He personally interviewed Howard, pressing him for details. Howard was modest. "Just doing my job," he said. Aker pressed, and Howard offered a brief account. 30 minutes, maybe 11 kills, ran out of ammunition, kept fighting. That evening, Aker submitted a Medal of Honor recommendation. The process moved quickly. Usually, approvals took months. Howard's took just 6 weeks. On March 6, 1944, Brigadier General Jesse Upton presented the Medal of Honor to Major James Howard at RAF Boxstead. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty in action with the enemy near Oschersleben, Germany on January 11, 1944, Major Howard became the only fighter pilot in the European theater to receive the Medal of Honor during World War II, not simply for shooting down 11 aircraft, but for defending 60 bombers alone for 37 minutes. For continuing the fight after running out of ammunition, ensuring 600 airmen returned home safely." The mission changed fighter doctrine. Before January 11th, fighters stayed close to bombers, defensive escort only. After Howard, they were authorized to pursue attackers aggressively. The 354th Fighter Group, the Pioneer Mustangs, proved the P-51B could fight and win against overwhelming odds. Within 3 months, 14 of 15 8th Air Force fighter groups converted to Mustangs. But there was something else, something the after-action reports and medal citation didn't capture. The bomber crews never forgot. 60 B-17s returned from Oschersleben on January 11th, 600 men alive, thanks to one Mustang and one pilot. Curiosity spread through the 8th Air Force. Who was he? Which squadron? The 401st tracked down Howard's unit. On January 18th, 7 days after the mission, bomber crews traveled to RAF Boxstead. They found Howard, shook his hand, some cried. Staff Sergeant William Thompson, who had watched the entire fight, counted every engagement. He said, "I've never seen anything like it. I owe my life to that silver P-51." Thompson survived 23 more missions, returned home to Pennsylvania, and named his first son James. The 354th Fighter Group continued operations until May 8, 1945, VE Day. The Pioneer Mustangs flew their last combat mission over Germany that morning. Final tally, 701 aerial victories, more than any other American fighter group in the European theater. 42 pilots became aces, but the cost had been high.
128 P-51s were lost in combat. 60 pilots killed or missing, 54 captured. Howard flew 26 more missions after Oschersleben, shooting down 6 more German aircraft, bringing his total to 17 kills. But he was never alone again. Fighter Command changed escort procedures after his mission. No more solo heroics. Flights stayed together. Mutual support became standard. Howard agreed. What he did on January 11th was necessary, but not repeatable. The P-51 Mustang went on to dominate the skies. By December 1944, 14 of 15 8th Air Force fighter groups flew Mustangs, escorting bombers deep into Berlin and back, a 700-mile radius. The Luftwaffe could no longer hide. Allied fighters could strike anywhere in Germany. Bomber losses dropped from 9% per mission in October 1943 to less than 2% by spring 1944. The strategic bombing campaign, nearly failing in 1943, succeeded in 1944, thanks to fighters like the P-51 and pilots like James Howard. Howard survived the war, returning to the United States in November 1944. The Navy offered him a position as a test pilot, which he accepted. He flew jets, tested carrier operations, and helped develop fighter tactics for the Korean War. Howard retired as a brigadier general in 1966 and passed away on March 18, 1995, at age 84. The legacy of the 354th Fighter Group endures. Every fighter pilot trains on the lessons Howard proved on January 11, 1944. Aggression wins fights. Speed saves lives. Altitude is insurance. Never leave your bombers. Sometimes one pilot in the right place at the right moment can change everything. James Howard didn't just save 600 lives that day. He showed what a single, determined pilot in an untested fighter could accomplish. Courage, innovation, and skill could overcome impossible odds. He became the benchmark every fighter pilot measures themselves against. That's the story of the pioneer Mustang Group, and the day one pilot defended 600 bombers alone over Germany. If this story inspired you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories of forgotten heroes from World War II, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We read every single one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.